The RTÉ Rugby Podcast, sponsored by Canterbury. See the new Irish men and women's rugby jerseys at canterbury.com.
And you're very welcome to the RTÉ Rugby Podcast as we look back on the weekend just gone in the Six Nations. Another win for Ireland, but how much do we actually learn from the Italy game? England just about scraped past Wales, and France look as good as ever. Delighted to have Johnny, Holland, Fiona, Hayes, Neil, Treacy with me. You're all welcome, gents and ladies. Johnny, look, we're not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about the Italy game because it was shambolic for loads of different reasons. It's well documented. I guess, what did we learn? And I know it's not an easy question because maybe the answer is very little, but what was your main takeaway from watching that game?
It was a hard one. I think you've been involved in those games when you're coaching, when you're playing, stuff like that. And it's one of those ones where it's a lose-lose because you put points on the board like that, no one gives you the respect for it. And then if you look at the frustrations that kind of came about in the game, I don't know if it's one of those ones that you really analyse deeply. I don't think England will be looking at it too deeply. You don't learn a whole lot about it. I think, unfortunately, you learned that James Hugh was possibly a little bit nervous, a couple of balls down. You learned that Robbie Henshaw had a HIA. He didn't look great when you see that on the top of the screen. So what we know about him, I'm not really sure at the moment. Hopefully the week extra will suit him. But I don't think we've learned a whole lot other than the fact that it's very hard to play against a pumped up 13-man side, and they will defend a lot more than what you think. So Ireland kind of going wide and trying to finish on the first phase, I think you've learned that you can't do that. Not in an international game with a very passionate team that won't really lie down, even though you get 57 points against you. But I think it was very difficult.
Yeah, I guess, and it sounds strange to say that it's difficult, Fiona, to play against a team with 13 men, but I understand Johnny's point. It's been made several times since. I think even Andy Farrell used the word, look, when you're up against a kamikaze defence with nothing to lose, it just creates chaos. And the way that Ireland have been building, I guess, since November is that they base their game plan around structure, and chaos doesn't really fit into that. Is that the best way of describing what happened?
Perfect, Hugh. I think the chaos ensued when we, exactly like Johnny said, just tried to go wide. Immediately, it was almost like we saw the space and Ireland tried to go there. So 22 handling errors from Ireland is very unusual. So I think, although there isn't a lot to learn, I think they definitely saw a few areas where they need to tighten up. I mean, you can even looking at a ruck. I mean, we know how defiant that Italian team were, but to have 5 ruck penalties conceded is crazy for this Irish team, especially from what we've seen. I know we saw it creeping in a little bit against France, but I definitely didn't expect that against that Italian team, especially 13 men.
Yeah, 100%. Neil, as a prop here, and I'm going to hold my hands on the table, right? Props are a position. I hadn't a breeze about this rule. I'm actually really glad that I wasn't even anywhere near a microphone on Sunday because I wouldn't have had a clue about what was going on. I think probably took a little bit of comfort from the fact that the referee didn't seem to have the full grasp of it either before he talked to his officials. But, I mean, what was your sense of the farce that was the 13-man rule?
Yeah, it was really strange. I was lucky enough now, we were up in the stand and we had the ref link earpieces so we could actually hear the conversation going on between the referee and his assistants, and Lamaro, the Italian captain, and Peter O'Mahony trying to explain the situation. And in fairness to him, he was absolutely crystal clear about what the law was, and this has to happen, and this is why it has to happen. And in fairness, his assistants were very good to him as well on that. But what I think it just showed up was the confusion around the ground and the fact that there were tens of thousands of people who didn't really understand what was happening. They didn't understand what the delay was happening down on the pitch. And you could sense the confusion around the stadium when they saw Halafihi walking off. And I think it was the stadium announcer just said Italy are now down to 13 players. And everyone around the ground is going, why? I'd say a lot of them were wondering, was he actually also red carded for doing something that, we somehow missed? So that's one thing I think it actually just showed up, that there needs to be a better engagement really with the crowd as well, to give them a sense of, because rugby has a lot of complicated laws. And look, I know you can say, ourselves, the media and stuff, we need to be more aware of them and stuff like that. But you'd have to be.
Do you know what was going through my head here?
Be a proper nerd to have known that, or you just would have had to be involved in the game where that happened before, if you were to have known about it.
Recently, somebody's made the point about we should be doing more halftime team shows and jazz up the game, which I don't agree with that at all. Like the NFL, but if you want to take something from the NFL, which they are very good at, is the referees' open communication in the stadium on pass interference, offside, whatever whatever it is that is communicated to the crowd in the stadium, so everyone understands what the penalty is for and why it's been given. And I don't think it would be impossible for that to happen in rugby, or would it? I don't know. What's your view on that?
I certainly would, particularly for internationals. top level club matches where, you know, the referees are mic'd up anyway and they're mic'd up onto TV, it should be reasonably simple to have a system where in those moments where the referee says time off and they go to TMO, that's when a microphone is turned on, a fader gets put up, and it goes out around the stadium. The referee is communicating with his assistants. He's speaking to the captains. He's speaking to the TMO, and you're able to hear that conversation, and you're able to hear that reasoning to go along with what you're watching on the big screen of the incident as well. Yeah. And then the referee gives his card. He decides there's nothing to be awarded. Play is restarted. The microphone gets turned off, and we go back to play. Like, I think that's it. It doesn't seem too complicated for that to be able to happen at big stadiums at top level rugby.
Exactly. And Fiona, the referee's mic'd up. There is a PA system there. They play music after tries are scored. I mean, everybody at home can hear what the referee's saying. It seems bizarre that the people who paid the most money to be there are the only ones who are left out of the whole conversation.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I was watching it in the pub, so we were able to go through everything on the big screen, and people were sending through things on WhatsApp of screenshots of the laws. So I think it took a bit of a while, I'd imagine, to go around the stadium. I know a couple of people were up there and hadn't a notion. It was exactly that. They thought for a couple of minutes there was a second red after being given. So it seems like the perfect idea. I love the NFL myself, so definitely love that communication. And even sometimes looking at when there's quick taps on penalties, and you're kind of thinking, what was that awarded for when the play resumes on? It would be good to get that over the system where you can get a clear indication, because sometimes you can't always see those ref signals.
Yeah, I think, Johnny, I'm just imagining a situation, you know, the referee's in the middle there, and he says, okay, penalty, advance 10 metres. Peter Mahoney just called Dylan Hartley a prick. Penalty in there. It's just easy. You know what I mean? No problem. You can do it, wrap it up, no issue.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps. Like, I mean, it does put the referees under a bit more pressure to have that communication then, and like they're under enough pressure as it is. But I think like it helps everyone. It maybe just forces them to be better with their communication too, and then everyone understands it, and maybe less frustration, maybe more at times. But it is a difficult one, and you know, understanding more where these decisions come from is definitely a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. Joey Carberry. Before we kind of move on from Italy as well, I don't want to dwell on it too much, as I say, but Joey Carberry, Johnny, what was your impression of his performance? And again, I don't want to be too critical of him here, because it was difficult for everybody in Ireland, it seemed, and I don't want to single him out. But the point has been made again that when Johnny Sexton came on, albeit Italy were tired, there was, you know, very heavy legs out there. There did seem to be straight away an improvement on the understanding and the lines of running and about the gaps that were open there. What was your assessment of his performance overall?
I think he was uncharacteristically poor at goal, and like that might have put another bit of a glass on the scoreline after all the tries they scored. So I was kind of, I wouldn't be disappointed. I was disappointed for him that he didn't strike a few more conversions, because he's been very good in the last, for a year or two now when he's been playing, that his conversions are really good, his kicking's been really good. So I was disappointed for him in that sense. I think he, like, you know, you look at the Marcus Smith comparison with England and like this kind of body language stuff, and you see how for Mike Lowry's try, Carberry pretending to put the ball on his toe and having that skill in his locker allowed Mike Lowry to get a bit of an easier run in, albeit he was rapid getting over the line, and that's his game. But like, yeah, I suppose like it's a difficult one. I think from his point of view as well, you're kind of going, am I playing against 14 and 13? How do I manage this? And when you go into those games, like it's a funny one. You feel nearly selfish for taking the inside shoulder, because there seems to be space on the edge, and no one wants to come out of that being like, oh, your man was out for himself and he was glory hunting and all this kind of stuff. I remember we played a game against Barcelona side with the Munster Academy, and we hockeyed them like it wasn't really a game. And it was a case of whoever took the ball on the inside shoulder and kept taking their own line breaks, you're nearly looking at him going, pass the ball, like, you know. So I think there was a little bit of that creeps into those games where you don't take the decision in front of your face, you know, you try and kind of force passes out to the edge. And I think it is a difficult management one for someone like Joey in there. Like, obviously Johnny Sexton was off the bench with massive amount of experience, tightens up the game a small bit. And no, I don't think they were as fluid either as what they'd like to be when Johnny Sexton came on. But it's easier maybe to assess it, have a conversation with the coaches, go on and just kind of, you know, bring the game back to basics. So no, at the same time, the first play that Johnny Sexton had, I think they had an exit, and that was one of the first James Hume knock-ons, because I think he was supposed to run hard. There was a forward inside him, and they kind of crossed wires, and the ball gets knocked down inside in the 22. So like, it didn't flow immediately either when Johnny Sexton came on. But I do think it's much more difficult than what you would think. Like, especially as a 10, you know, you give the pass with the trust that the guys on the outside are going to actually look after that ball. And then, you know, Mac Hansen, because of the front five coming hard off the line, kamikaze style, like Andy Farrell said, Mac Hansen's thinking the space in the backfield, so I'll kick this ball. You never really build phases, and I think that's the biggest issue with Ireland at the weekend. They didn't build those phases, but again, it is, like Andy Farrell said, a weird situation, and it's hard to play into, you know.
Okay, so then, Phil, but on the overall context of things, and you think about how good Ireland were in the November series, and they were very, very good clinical against Wales as well, and I think even the fact that Wales beat Scotland since and put it up to England at Twickenham, albeit they weren't great, has highlighted how good Ireland were in that opening game. But we have seemed to regress a little bit from that. The France game, obviously, we didn't have Sexton. Italy was what it was. Any worries at all that we're just on a little bit of a downward trajectory, or do you have enough confidence that we can get back to our A game, if you like, at Twickenham on Saturday week?
I've big confidence we can get back to that A game. As I said, there's a couple of areas they definitely need to look at. I mean, those ruck areas, Andy Farrell will be extremely disappointed at, like, especially as he has coached defence as well. So there's a few things that need to be tightened up. But I would say that, you know, we're starting to see combinations come together. There's players kind of putting their hand up. We saw how important, I think, for me, I saw how important Lowe is on the pitch with that left boot. He gives us an option. So it's about getting those combinations. Hopefully Johnny is fit and, you know, he can pull the strings. I think Twickenham's going to be obviously a far different game than this Italy game. Is going to be far more physical, but we showed glimpses of that in the second half in France. So I think we take what we brought in that second half with France and bring it onto that game in Twickenham against England.
Neil, what's your back three in your centre? If everyone's fit, what do you think Andy Farrell will do for the centre combination and your back three?
I think England, I think specifically for England, he'll bring Aki in. And I think Henshaw might be the one to drop back to the bench, just because he's had Ringrose and he's had Aki together for the early rounds of the Six Nations, and even in the first couple of rounds of November as well. They were the two that were together because Henshaw was only coming back from injury. That would be the centre I think is probably going to start against England, and I reckon we're probably going to go back to the back three of Keenan, Lowe, and Conway. I think Lowe, again, just because it's England, there's a bit more experience there than Hansen, and he probably has a better boot than Hansen does as well. And I think Hansen was probably unfortunate in the Italy game that he got pushed out onto the right wing, where Ireland, they used their left winger a lot more to come into play and come into midfield and get involved in the game. Whereas, you know, the way they use Andrew Conway a lot of the time out in that right wing is for the more structured stuff, for really good kick chases, which he's absolutely brilliant at, but they don't necessarily see as much ball as someone like James Lowe will out in the left wing.
Yeah, but John, also as well, that's a really good point, because I was watching the England back three as well at Twickenham against Wales, and they use Max Malins and Freddie Stewart interchangeably as almost two 15s, and even if you put Nolan into it as well. So Andrew Conway's unbelievable ability under the high ball for a guy who's not the tallest in the world is going to be really important, along with Hugo Keenan, when they're playing against that English back three, I think. Yeah,
I think definitely as well. And I think that's one of the main reasons I'd have Conway in as well, because he's like, I don't want to say, like, it almost feels like you're kind of saying a criticism to say he's a very, very safe player, but he's very, very safe in that regard of up under the high ball. He's also capable of doing some really, really exciting things when they get him into space and when you get him chasing down a ball and stuff like that as well. So I just think he's probably an all-round player you want for a game like England. It's nothing against Mac Hansen whatsoever, who's done absolutely fantastic in the few caps he's had. I just think for a game against England away at Twickenham, it's probably a place where you want Lowe and Conway on the wings rather than someone like Hansen, who's still very, very new in his international career.
Which unfortunately probably means Hansen will miss out in the squad altogether if you're going to have Robbie Henshaw along, who can cover a couple of different positions. Watching England as well, Johnny, just to move it on a bit, it does seem like, and if you're Andy Farrell, like, it's not taking a genius to say this, if you stop Marcus Smith, England are very, very flat and limp, particularly in the back line. Centre combination there, they didn't offer a huge amount. If you stop Marcus Smith and you go at him hard, you potentially nullify England's attack, a huge part of it.
Yeah, like, you're looking at some of the stats there this morning, like, they're not freely scoring tries, aside from that Italy game, obviously, but they're not freely scoring tries at all. And, like, you know, you look at Manu Tuolangi nearly coming back in last week, that's the punch that they're missing. And, like, we see at a club level and at, like, you know, the professional club level, that you need to have go forward. And if that's going to be 10 times worse at international level. So, like, yeah, Slade and Elliot Daly can play ball, but when you've got Marcus Smith and those two lads outside them, like, they're great ball players, but you don't really have that punch that England are used to. And, like, normally that's where they bully teams, and you see that, you know, Fiona, you spoke about the breakdown. I think England's going to be massively frustrating, actually. Like, you know, it's all this stuff that Ireland will be back. They'll have a good win over and win in Twickenham. But the last time we thought that, you know, Ireland would steamroll England because we got that confident, it was 2019, and it's the end of our World Cup because everything fell to pieces. Like, and my fear is that you could get something like that again. Now, I hope I'm absolutely wrong and that everything kind of flows again and Johnny Sexton's back in there, and Bundy Aki seems to be very key to how that ball moves through the kind of pod to three in the middle of the field and stuff like that. But yeah, I think obviously, like, Marcus Smith just gets so much ball in his hands. He's class to watch, and having been a 10 and not being as free flowing as what he looks. He just wants to get the ball in his hands every time, and that's massively difficult for the defence, because you have to keep watching, you have to keep looking. He's going to catch you out. But then when you don't have that punch outside him like Manny Tuolangi, who may be back yet, I don't know. They're a little bit easier to stop. But back to Fiona's point on the breakdown, like I told you, Tom Curry, if he's past fit, these lads are going to absolutely destroy the breakdown. And that kind of defensive pressure, the breakdown pressure that England tend to put on Ireland, that's what's going to catch them. It's not going to be Ireland's attacking game, and it's not going to be their exit off the left foot. And I think it's going to be the breakdown and the physicality inside in those collisions,
Yeah, 100% agree with you. Speaking of fly halves, before we move on, Fiona, if you're Finn Russell watching back that, it's been well documented on Twitter now for everyone to see, like his 4 steps in attempt to kind of come back and defend for his country against France at the weekend. I mean, Gregor Townsend, does he have a decision here to make? Does he need to send a message? Look, this is not acceptable. That level of performance tracking back. And we all know what Finn Russell gives you in attack and how brilliant he is with the ball on occasion, probably not as consistently as you'd want to see. But like, should Gregor Townsend say, look, I got to make a statement here. I can't have lads playing like this for Scotland. Should he drop him next time?
I think so. I mean, the first thing that sticks out about that whole limping back was he was the guy that actually kicked the ball away. He kicked it too deep. So it's his error in the first place. And to not even chase or even look like you're chasing, what you said, he just offers such pizzazz at times, but he could be exceptionally frustrating to watch. So as a coach, whether he's had conversations about his work rate with him before, he definitely needs to be having with him now. I would imagine that he would say, look, put him on the bench, see if he can come on and bring and change his mindset. But for me, that wasn't acceptable. And he's playing over in France. I thought he'd be absolutely hungry to get at the French. It was just, and that was in the first 5 minutes. It was crazy for me to watch.
And if he doesn't drop him, Neil, he's basically saying this fella can do what the hell he likes on the pitch, and he's pretty much unmovable. That's what Gregor Townsend's saying, because the more you watch that, the more you think how much of a disgrace it was.
Yeah, and it actually just sums up the tricky situation Townsend is in as well, because like as you're saying, does he actually just decide now enough is enough and he needs to make a point? Well, the last time he tried to make a point when it came to Finn Russell was at the start of the Six Nations a couple of years ago, and that relationship took probably the guts of a year to repair itself before it eventually got back on track last season. And, does he do that all over again and run the risk of a situation where he's still potentially still at odds with Finn Russell 6-7 months out from a World Cup next year? So that's the tricky situation he finds himself in. I think he probably just has to have some harsh words and maybe call out some that bit of play in a team meeting or something like that. I think maybe dropping him might just cause a little bit too much chaos in and around the media, where the story is just going to blow up if Finn Russell gets dropped for the next game.
Yeah, and like if you had someone like an Adam Hastings coming through, who you could say, Fiona, like there's a ready-made replacement to step in here, and this is going to send a message out, he might be more inclined to drop him, versus what's underneath now. The fall off is probably a little bit too big of a gamble. And if Scotland were to go out and lose the next game, for example, and he's dropped, then Townsend's position becomes all of a sudden, oh Christ.
Yeah, it's the media fury around that, definitely. Everyone loves Finn Russell. We love talking about him. We love looking at what he does. We saw what happened the last time. The step up is massive. The gap between him and what's underneath is exactly that. That's why he can't do it. If you were looking at it in Ireland, saying you had Joey who's chomping at the bit to be getting on that pitch, you'd have no issue in doing that. I just don't think there's competition at 10 at the minute in Scotland.
Okay, Finn Russell has the power in that relationship rather than Gregor Townsend, and that's the unfortunate situation he's in.
Yeah, but you see, that's exactly it, and he knows it, Neil. Like he knows he's almost undroppable at the moment, which is why he didn't bother his hole to try to chase back there. Townsend's in a position now, but if Townsend's going to go down with that ship, right? If he's going to go down with ship and say, right, I'm just going to let things go, status quo stays, your man's undroppable, off he goes. Like he's hitching his sail to one player, and if it doesn't work out, how much regret will he have then if he's the guy who the spotlight falls back on? It's a big gamble for him.
It is, but it's probably the one worth taking in the long run, do you think?
Yeah.
Pitching yourself to Finn Russell rather than what, like Adam Hastings or something like that.
Yeah.
As much as Finn Russell maybe potentially comes with a little bit of hassle, I'd probably be more inclined to actually just take the chance and take the bad days and pray that the good ones are as good as they usually are.
Yeah, fair enough. What about anyone stop France, Johnny, then, before we move on to other matters? I mean, they looked very good again at times against Scotland. It wasn't a perfect performance, but I mean, I didn't see anything in England on Saturday to suggest that they remotely trouble France in Paris.
No, and I think like we've probably been calling that since the start of the tournament or long before the tournament, and it's that I think most of world rugby, besides their own country, they want France to win that World Cup, like, and this is a stepping stone towards that. But when you see like Ireland went really well in 2018 ahead of the 2019 World Cup, I don't really see that happening in France where they're going to run out of juice. I think a team will frustrate them at some stage. Maybe England, because they'll absolutely go at their breakdown, like I said, and they might just be really physical. And England are going to be dangerous if you write them off. If England lose to Ireland and then they go up against France, like, they're going to be very dangerous, but they're also going to be lacking more confidence as that goes on. So, no, I think, like, in theory, you don't see France. You shouldn't see them being stopped. If someone's calling that at the moment, I think it's a lucky guess. There's just so much going with them. They've got the power and the flair that they've always had with the defensive structures now through Sean Edwards, that it's a really hard combination to get through. It's going to be a real tactical masterclass with a combination of players that just step up on a day to kind of upset them at the moment.
Okay, talk to me about the Energy All-Ireland League Women's Division final. I guess last round, if you like, for Railway Union against Blackrock, Fiona, because it was a cracking match, 24-18, plenty of drama. It had a bit of everything, and Railway come out and defend their league title. And what did you make of the game, first of all?
Absolutely cracking game for television. I was coaching myself earlier that day, so I couldn't get up to it. Yeah. So I was watching it on TV, and we had Setonians in the first game and Galwegians, and that Railway Blackrock game was probably one of the best games I've seen in a long time. It was super rugby, really, really executed. Things were done at a high intense speed. I think the breakdowns and everything were probably 2, 3, 4 seconds max. So it was just brilliant rugby to watch. I think Railway came out firing in the first 20-30 minutes, and it was probably not till after the second half we saw Blackrock really kind of wake up and get themselves back in the game. So it was brilliant. If it went on for another 10 minutes, it could have been anyone's game. I thought Blackrock were definitely coming back into it. But I think the thing for me, Hugh, as well, is a lot of girls vying for an Irish jersey. It was a chance for them to put it on the stage, and a lot of Railway Union and Blackrock players definitely put their hand up and said, "Hey, Greg, have a look at me." Well,
that's the huge point then, isn't it? I guess there was a lot of kind of winced eyebrow watching the Scotland farce Colombia game. Look, it was over before it even started, really. But a lot of what ifs there in regards to the Irish situation. So you feel that there is now more of a strong talent pool for which Greg McWilliams can kind of come into it fresh and try and just reinvigorate this Irish team?
Definitely, and you know what was really good you to see as well is that those girls that done so well in the 7th circuit, they came back. They're playing rugby. We were playing Lucy, we were playing Wicklow, we were playing Lucy Mulhall. Myself, I had a chat with her. She's so happy to be actually on a 15s team playing rugby. So they were told, go play rugby and you'll be judged off your performance, not what's going on in 7s. And those girls, definitely Eve Higgins for Railway was excellent as well. So the pool is just getting bigger and bigger. There was some girls that maybe might not have made the squad or might not have been seen as good enough in Griggs' eyes, and I think they put their hands up as well. So it's going to be very interesting, especially they had a camp already and none of the girls that are playing over in England were involved. So it's going to be very interesting when the squad is announced. I think it could be this week. They're in camp this week. Will there be many overseas players on that squad?
And it's brilliant, Neil, to have this national window now, being able to watch the club game for the women's game. You think how far, I guess, even since a couple of years ago, this wouldn't have even been entertained. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't even have the first clue about the women's club game and what clubs are involved, and even some of the players around. The fact that it was televised the weekend, and the game was so good as well. Both games was massive, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the spread of clubs, obviously, that are I know it's obviously a little bit more Dublin concentrated these days, but like, I remember when 10 plus years ago, when I would have been becoming more and more aware, and we all would have about Irish women's rugby, and like, as far as I was concerned, I think it was actually your UL Bows team, Fiona, that it just seemed every year you were kind of blown past everyone, and now you've got a much greater spread. I know it's the Dublin teams that have taken over from UL Bows now in the last couple of years, but look, even as you were saying, down in Cork playing with it, like, it's Ballincollig, isn't it? They seem a relatively new team to be coming through, and I think the top 4 split coming up towards the Six Nations window as well obviously means that the bigger teams are playing against the better players week on week at the right stage leading up to the Six Nations. And I'd be curious as well, Fiona, to get your thoughts on, like, what are how do we have to kind of measure the expectations for the Six Nations now? Because obviously it's a time of transition for the Irish team, but also do we have to kind of factor in the fact as well that all the other teams in the Six Nations are building themselves towards a World Cup. So they might not necessarily be firing all cylinders in the Six Nations Championship. And is that an opportunity for Ireland?
Yeah, I don't think it works as much as like that in the women's game because they don't have as many matches. So I would imagine all the England, France, the likes will be putting out their full squads. But I think they'd want to be looking at winning all home games. I think it's we France and England away, the same as the guys. But I think it's definitely a possibility. I think there was other issues that came into place. We've chatted about so many times before. So I think it's a blank page now. I think you're looking at a very, very strong, very, very, very strong squad. I've heard names of people who've been going up and down, and they're kind of getting involved in gym work now. So I think you'd be looking at those home games and looking to win those, because there is that super competition where they want to finish in the top 3 in the Six Nations, because then you get the chance to go on and play the likes of New Zealand or Canada or America. So that's something they need to strive for now. So they do have a goal.
Yeah, 100%. And like as I say, the Six Nations, I guess we'll learn a little bit more about McWilliams, the style of play he wants to develop, and some of those new players as we come towards the Women's Six Nations. Johnny, the AIL, I'm just looking at the table here. So Clontarf are 9 points here at the top, Lansdowne, Terenure and Con 4th place, 6 ahead of Young Munster. So am I right in saying, like same with my local club, it's a playoff system again for the league once you get to, okay, grand, because Greystones have topped it and they have to go into a playoff now as well. You're waiting for all the permutations. I saw Birch's Bective as well. They topped their league against the Tonians at the weekend. They've got to go into a playoff now. So Con, are you kind of timing this one to peak at the perfect time? Like, don't be paying any bit of blind notice with the 4th place in the table at the moment.
No, I wish we could say that. I mean, the last couple of years we were probably blessed that we did go closer to the top, and just before the pandemic we were kind of on an unbeaten run, and then this year just seems to be a little bit more stop-start, unfortunately. But like, that's the way it is. Like, it's going to be a difficult year coming out of all the different stop-start leagues and stuff like that. But it's grand to be in 4th and still having, like, you'd always feel once you get into 4th you can beat anyone on your day. You're going to have to probably go away from home. Well, you are going to have to go away from home if you only stay in 4th, and there's probably only limited opportunities now to try and chase back to 2nd. But it's fairly competitive and it's great. But like, Terenure are probably the ones that have caught people because they had a hard start and then all of a sudden they came good. They gave us a bit of an eye opener. So they're worth their value inside in 3rd, and everyone's playing each other now at the top 4 as well. Like, so we still have to play Clontarf and Lansdowne and Young Munsters, and I know Terenure are playing similar games. They've Clontarf and Lansdowne as well, and I think Young Munsters were following their games. So everyone's playing against each other, but it's highly competitive, and it's always going to be difficult, if you get to a final on hard surfaces against those.
Yeah. I know, and you're going to play down all that kind of crap, but Con, like, when they get to the semi-final, you lads know how to win, and I certainly wouldn't be overlooking. And like, as you said, like the 4 best teams now in the top 4 positions, Johnny, and Clontarf, I guess are ahead, but as you said, like, Lansdowne playing some cracking rugby as well. And the standard of the league this year, for anyone who's seen it, has been brilliant. I just think the games have been absolutely brilliant across the board.
Yeah, it's unreal. It is, and you see people are getting more and more interested in it again. Like, and you get, like, Jack Crowley played with us last weekend, and it's great. Like, people are excited about that, and Sean French and Alex McHenry are playing with us quite a bit. And you talk to people about that. Like, it's actually great for our players. Whoever they are, whatever the level they're at, even if it's on a training pitch on a Tuesday and Thursday night, they're the shoulders you're rubbing. So, like, I mean, the standard is up there, and every time you go to play against a team, you're kind of wondering who's going to be on the opposition team. Like, will Scott Penny be playing with UCD? Like, this is what you're looking at every week. So it's it's class. Obviously I enjoy it. I'm involved in it, but the quality is definitely better and better there.
No Limerick size inside the top 4, lads. Fiona, let's go.
No. Well, Hugh, unfortunately, I'm an adopted Terenure man.
All right.
They're my home club, but no, I joined Terenure years ago when I moved up to Dublin, and
all right. That was a good foresight thinking here, wasn't it?
I'm still playing a little bit. I'm still playing some junior stuff. We're in a Metro final this coming Saturday against Wesley. But no, just even like the last couple of weekends, I've been down in the club in Terenure, and I wasn't actually watching their game against Terenure at the weekend because we were playing on the pitch adjacent to it, so I just had half an eye over it.
And a bit of a slower pace.
Don't be saying that.
Yeah, no, there's a fantastic atmosphere down there at the moment with the way things are going. Like, as Johnny said, they've 10 wins in a row now. They started 3 defeats in a row and then won 10 on the spin. Yeah. And they've Clontarf this weekend. I think Clontarf have won 9 in a row or something like that. So, like, it's just set up fantastically. But it's just great. It just shows the buzz that's down there around the club scene, and you can just see even the crowds are picking up week on week. There's just a far greater excitement week on week, and it's just great to be involved in things like that, you know.
No, it is. It's brilliant. And look, I know. Look, we're all fans of it in this thing, so we're preaching to convert it here, Fiona. But yeah, no, it's a very exciting league this year. Look, regardless of who wins it as well, the table's shaping up pretty nicely at the moment.
Yeah, my mother's a cookie, so I don't know what's happened to young Munsters.
They started this the opposite of They started brilliantly.
They started so good. I think they've had a few injuries. I think the front row in particular got hit. So I know in talking to a few people that's what they're saying anyway. But no, look, it's exciting. I went down to watch a few months back. I had a weekend off and I decided to go to see more rugby. I went to watch yourselves, Johnny, and Trinity, or Dublin University as they're called now, and it was an absolutely cracking game. You know, they had a good few lads released from Leinster, a few lads released as well, and it was just the cohesion. Even seeing that, you know, these guys are probably only coming on Thursday night to training, and as a coach to be able to fit them into a squad, and it's going on week in, week out up in Clontarf, everywhere. It's really good, and it's brilliant rugby to watch. So exciting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we've got Trinity again this week, and they're always tough, like punch above their weight. And like Jack Dunn played that day, I think, didn't he?
He did. Yeah.
Massive man. Like I think there was some sort of silence before the game. I can't remember what it was for. And you're looking at the size of him, like he's a big man. So seeing people like that, you know, inside the league, it's actually class. So it brings the standard up for everyone.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, lads. Look, pleasure as always. 2 games on RTÉ television this weekend, by the way, in the URC Ulster Cardiff on Friday night from Belfast, and on Saturday it's Treviso against Leinster. We'll come back next week and preview England at Twickenham. Look, it's setting up very nicely, and obviously we'll go through the permutations next week on the podcast. Thanks for your time, lads. Talk to you next week.
The RTÉ Rugby Podcast, sponsored by Canterbury. See the new Irish men and women's rugby jerseys at canterbury.com.